everyone! So, I'm kind of jumping on the bandwagon and I'm doing my own post about the whole 50 Shades of Grey's phenomenon. Quick disclaimer, haven't actually read the book. I've had a lot of it summarized to me, and I'm not so much objecting to... I'm not going to talk about the literary quality of it because I haven't read it, but some of the scenarios that I've had described to me actually really put me on edge. Apparently the author likes to brag about the fact that she did no research prior to writing this book, and from what I've heard, it shows. And I also heard that it's extremely insulting to people who are actually into the whole BDSM thing. So let's start off with at the beginning. Apparently this whole fetish in the main character, Christian, comes from the fact that he was sexually abused as a young man. And basically it sets up the idea of BDSM as some kind of flaw, or something that's sort of a way for them to cope with what happened to them, and ultimately something that needs to be fixed. So let's get one thing straight just right off the bat. BDSM, sorry, blah, is not a flaw. It's a unique aspect of somebody's personality that just makes them into different things. Kinks in general are not a flaw. Whether it be a foot fetish, being into spanking, into caning, into whipping, into biting, into scratching, into diaper play, nipple play, even stuff that a lot of the mainstream finds a lot more disturbing, like, for example, urine play, cross-dressing. They're not flaws. They're just a different aspect of somebody's personality, and that's it. If it's not something you're into, great, then don't do it. But you're missing out. A lot of that stuff, I mean, yeah, I might not be into all of it, but if my partner is, then to an extent, within reason, I'm willing to give it a try, simply because you learn stuff about yourself. And BDSM is becoming more and more mainstream. I mean, we've got a lot of, look at music, actually a lot of the videos that have been coming out with sort of the strong women who've been taking sort of the dominatrix angle in order to sort of explore their strength, which is fine. But we still have this idea, we still very much have this idea of people who have kinks are somehow damaged, and they're not. Even just studying psychology, we know that there aren't cut and dry answers for why people have fetishes. I mean, you know, Freud liked to say, oh, well, you know, it was stunted at certain levels of their development, and that's why they have an obsession with it. You have an oral fixation because your oral period didn't have enough stimulation. Or, you know, you're a homosexual who's into anal play because you didn't have enough stimulation during your anal period. No. Doesn't work that way. It's not as cut and dry. You can't tie back any kind of fetish to a specific instant. It's just something that happens. And honestly, it's something that makes people more interesting. People with fetishes just have a different sex life than what people generally assume is normal. And heck, it can actually be a more fun sex life that way. And even going off from that, let's just get one thing straight. Anything that, I mean, oral sex used to be considered a kink. And a lot of the things that people consider to be mainstream really, really aren't. Most people have desires and have fantasies that deviate quite a lot from the normal heteronormative ideal. Moving on from that, one of the aspects that really disturbs me about what I've heard so far about the 50 Shades of Grey thing is how they portray a lot of the scenes. First of all, there's no safe word. There seems to be this idea that if you agree to any kind of domination, submission play with your partner, that you have to, you know, take everything they give to you, even if you don't enjoy it, and you just have to deal with it, and that they can do whatever they want to you. It doesn't work that way. If anything, submissive partners actually kind of have more of the control, because at any given moment, they have the absolute ability to say stop. And when they say it, it has to stop, or the dom is a bad top. And actually, if you know anything about the scene, you know that bad tops get a quick reputation and don't have any goods, and don't get a lot of subs to sub for them anymore, because their bad tops. Lacey Green actually makes a really good reference to the idea of aftercare, which is important. I mean, it's still a sexual idea. I mean, you don't just get up and leave your partner after the fact, and moreover, this is something that's more draining, and you do need to do something after the fact to kind of re-tie in your bond afterwards. I mean, it'd be pretty much, think of how much it can hurt when you spend, for example, a long time, you know, giving someone oral sex, and then they just up and leave immediately after you're done. It's not fun. And it would be no more fun if you spend a while, you know, spanking or whipping someone, or, you know, helping them out with any kind of other fantasy, and then they just got up and left immediately afterwards. You're going to feel a little bit used. And I mean, that's the truth no matter what kind of sexual interaction it is. It really bothers me that apparently, and yeah, this is apparently a spoiler alert, but whatever, that apparently at the end of the book she fixes him. One thing that women do need to realize, and men need to realize this too, just right off the bat, you can't fix a kink. If they have a kink, they're going to have it for life. They might not need to have that kind of sex every single time. In fact, most people don't, but they are going to want it. So if you're dating someone who has a kink and you're not into it, chances are you're not going to have a very happy sex life, either of you, in the long run. So unless you're willing to open up your relationship in such a way that they can fulfill their kink on their own, you probably shouldn't be making any long-term monogamous commitments to one another. This is something Dan Savage says a lot, and something I really, really agree with. Sexual fulfillment in marriage is not the only thing, but it's a big one. And it's important. And if you're not willing to help your partner get their rocks off, then you need to make provisions for them to be able to do so themselves, or you need to not be with them. That, you know, and I mean, yes, I know that there's people out there who are asexual, and I mean, if they end up with partners who are asexual, then that's awesome. If they end up with partners who are sexual, then they shouldn't dictate the idea that their partners never get to have sex. It's all about consent, you know, and just because you don't consent to have sex doesn't mean they consent to never having sex. And yes, it's a delicate issue, but it's something that really needs discussion and something that really needs communication. In BDSM, in BDSM, like in any kind of sexual relationship, the most important thing and the thing that should be consistent is communication. You need to be able to talk about what you want, about what you need, and you need to keep that communication open. Just because something's the case one time doesn't mean it'll be the case the other time. One of the ways to be the best in bed is to make sure that you communicate your wants, your needs to your partner, and that you listen and respond to what they communicate to you. If you're not willing to have that communication, well then chances are your sex life isn't going to be all that satisfying in the long run. It's an interesting phenomenon, actually, that especially a lot of women will not talk about what they want, and a lot of the big concerns that they have is that if they speak up, well, they might insult their partners because their partners might think that they didn't enjoy the sex up until that point, to which the countering argument is, well, if you didn't, then shouldn't they know that? Because if you didn't enjoy the sex up until that point, aren't you going to resent it in the long run? It's just the way that works. You as women are just as entitled to sexual pleasure as men. You as men are just as entitled to talking about what you want as women. Women, you can't assume that all men are the same. You can't assume that all men want the same thing, and that something that worked with one partner is going to work with your other partner. Men, same thing. You can't assume that something that worked with your past girlfriend is going to work with your new one. And for that matter, you can't assume that your girlfriend is tame and vanilla. There's a lot of kinky girls out there who have a hard time talking about what they want because, and I know this from experience, if you're into anything that deviates from the norm as a woman, well then you get to get called things like slut, nymph, hoe, actually nymph is pretty much the most common one, nymphomaniac, who is domineering and emasculates men. And guys, you want to get laid more? How about you stop with that one? Because that one gets really annoying really fast. And any guy who basically tries to say that there's something wrong with a woman who likes a lot of sex shouldn't be getting any. Sorry. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Enjoy.